I have a lot of trouble, especially now, holding my tongue on these sorts of things.
Nate, how did you find carnivore?
So it was quite a process. I started with keto 13 years ago. I had a lifelong seizure disorder that no doctors could figure out. Nobody could get any kind of idea of what it was. I had these auras that started in like sixth grade, as early as I can remember, and they weren't debilitating. They were very odd and just very short. They didn't do anything to me at first, and then when I got into college, they started getting very severe, almost preventing me from being able to think and interact with people. And it was almost like I had a stroke each time I had one of these, and they started occurring almost daily. Um, in college, and then eventually one of them led up to an actual grand mal seizure that almost killed me, and that's when they started putting me on anti seizure medications, which I was on for a couple of years. That just made me worse until I got really lucky and I came across a friend who directed me to a doctor. A he's kind of more of a like anti-aging type doctor, but he asked me if anybody had ever looked into my diet. And I always worked out, and so I was always in decent shape. I never looked like I was unhealthy, and so I told him no, like nobody's ever asked me about diet. I went to three different neurologists. Each one of them gave me a different anti seizure med, and so then uh, he recommended, well, why don't you try a keto diet? That's something that's often been that used to be prescribed for seizure disorders. And in 2 months, my seizures completely disappeared. I was off of all medications, and I haven't taken any since, and I haven't had a single seizure since then. Yeah, after a lifetime of not being able to figure it out. So that was kind of how my journey into all of this started. So that was really eye opening for me because I was a huge my whole family is very um, big believers in the experts and authority figures and science and kind of mainstream science. And I was a big proponent of that as well. My degree is in psychology and philosophy. I studied all of that stuff, and so but once I learned about that, and once I tried to look into the actual science for myself, and I saw that everything was saying that this shouldn't have happened, that's when I started to get really suspicious and look into things a lot deeper. And so over the course of many years there, I was kind of experimenting more with keto. And my keto was I really didn't know what I was doing at first. Like I didn't know anything about seed oils or or any of that stuff. And so it was just I knew I was supposed to eat less than like 30 net carbs per day. So I wasn't even eating 30 total carbs. I was eating probably like 60 to 80 carbs a day and just getting most of it from fiber and sugar alcohols and that kind of crap. Um, and so but so even with that, I still had crazy results. Like I felt so much better. I dropped 30 pounds. I wasn't overweight, but I just dropped 30 pounds. And then people started, I had started working at gyms already. That was where I first started working. And my coworkers were already asking me what I was taking, like what, if I was on testosterone or whatever, because they didn't believe that I just would suddenly drop 30 pounds and look bigger, um, but more muscular. I mean, because my strength improved as well, really dramatically, really quickly. And, and so as I was looking more into that, I spent years and years on keto, but I never quite corrected a lot of my other issues. I still had gut problems. I still had daily digestive discomfort. I still had skin problems, dental problems. My eyes were still kind of slowly getting worse, although that had already kind of halted the process. They were supposed to get a lot worse a lot faster, but that had started to slow it down. Going keto did, I mean. And then uh, and so then about 6 years ago in 2018, I had started watching a bunch of originally Jordan Peterson stuff. Um, and ironically, I didn't actually know he and his daughter did anything with carnivore. I didn't know anything about Michaela Peterson or that either of them did carnivore. I just happened to, I guess, the algorithm bumped me into like because I was watching Jordan Peterson's like lectures on YouTube, and then I suddenly got one the interview with Sean Baker and Joe Rogan. And so I saw that and I was like, oh, this guy's an actual doctor and he's doing this, and that's really interesting. And this kind of goes along with some of the stuff that now makes more sense to me because I've had so many years researching. And and so I tried it in 2018, January of 2018, and that was the first time literally every single issue, like it sounds crazy, but literally every single issue I ever had disappeared in 21 days. My allergies completely disappeared. Uh, I started sleeping better. I started feeling better. And bear in mind, at this time, I had just opened a business with a friend, and I was working 19-hour days, 7 days a week, uh, to keep that business running. And I was sleeping 2 to 4 hours a night at most. Uh, and I did that for about 2 years. And I'm convinced that the only reason I didn't go insane from doing that was because I had so dramatically made that change in my diet. Now, I wasn't perfect then. I had 21 days where I was really strict. I was just doing like steaks, eggs, uh, and then I think I was only seasoning it with like garlic powder, salt and pepper, maybe some onion powder or something. I was pretty minimal though, because I only had the opportunity to eat one meal a day then. Uh, and but then my business partner was a big food addict, and so he and I would still binge every so often, like every few weeks. We would have a cheat meal and screw ourselves up, and I'd feel like crap for a week, and then I'd have to get back in it. And after enough times of doing that, I started to realize, oh, there's nothing in this for me. Like the food doesn't even taste as good as it used to. Plus, I feel like crap. It takes me so many days to recover. My workouts are worse for all of that time that I'm recovering, and then I just have to wait until I feel the way I know that I should feel. And so it was many years of doing that. It took me 4 years of doing that before I finally said, okay, maybe I should just stop doing this stupid cheating thing altogether. And so in January, mid January, beginning of February of 2022, I was like, okay, I'm just done with this. I want to go the Judy Cho route because I looked into her stuff as well, and I'd read her Carnivore Cure book, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to go full elimination. And so for about close to 6 months, I did um, full lion diet, just beef, salt, water. Um, and I had that helped me experience what I call my zero carb Zen, which was uh, where I mean, I think I've heard that term thrown around before. Um, it was just like everything kind of heightened for me. Like all of my senses felt better. My thought process was crystallized in some way, and I just had this resounding peace that just nothing could really disturb it. Uh, it
Mm.
was really interesting.
As you describe it there, it makes me think of the one of the scenes from The Matrix, where the bullets are going at him, and then suddenly the bullets slow down, and it's almost like there's a clarity and time to think about what action to
Exactly.
take or something.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, and that's exactly kind of how it felt, and I just um, everything just started to make more sense. I noticed that after that point, I had started reading a lot more books just because I'd already been doing a bunch of research and just on my own. I had been out of school for years, but I just wanted to learn more. And I started listening to a lot of audiobooks, and I had to start listening to stuff on 2 times speed because just listening to stuff normally was too slow for me. And so I needed it at double the speed in order to process more information more quickly, which was just so odd because my whole life throughout school I struggled. Like I did really well in school, but it was because I spent hours upon hours every single day just memorizing facts and trying to keep everything in my brain because I didn't learn well, and I was in public school, so I didn't get I had some good teachers, but they were teaching large classes, and there's only so much they can do with that. And so I didn't learn well the way that they taught, and and so I just basically memorized everything, and then I forgot it all as soon as I left school. And once I found carnivore, and then realized that I had such a passion for learning, I just started absorbing information like a sponge, and I'm now actually going, partly thanks to my fiance, I'm going back to school now to become a nurse practitioner, and it's such a strange because it's now been 10 years since I've done any kind of school, 11 years actually since I've done any kind of schooling, and it's such a strange contrast. Number one, to see how different schools are now from how they were 11 years ago, but also to see how differently I learn. Like I can I can just listen to the information, understand it, and absorb it, and that's not something I've ever been able to do before. Like I just took my first exam actually on Monday there, and it was the first time in my life where I took an exam and I didn't feel stressed out. I didn't feel anxious. I didn't feel like, oh my gosh, did I really study everything correctly? Like I almost felt anxious just because I was like, why am I not feeling anxious? Like I always get anxious with tests. Why am I so calm? Like, did I not study well enough? But I felt extremely confident on the test, and actually I can in fact double check it right now just to see my actual grades here because I haven't actually checked it today, but I'm sure I got somewhere between a yep, yeah, I got like a 90% on it without really even studying at all. Uh,
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. So yeah, that was kind of over. I tend to get overly wordy with these things, so forgive me. But that was kind of the start of my process into this.
So, um, you did kind of streak the line at the start, but what are you how are you eating now?
So I stuck with Lion, like I said, for about 6 months, and then I tried to take Judy Cho's advice with the slow reintroduction protocol, where I was doing, one food at a time, like a small amount the first day, a slightly larger amount the second day, and etc. And with that, I eventually reintroduced all animal foods. So I have no problems. I don't even have problems with dairy anymore. I can even handle milk, even pasteurized milk, which is really nice. If I want to, I don't very often, um, but I can handle that without digestive problems or discomfort like I used to have. And now I'm kind of pretty much just kind of more the general laxed carnivore, I would say. I do all animal products. I still minimize dairy just because it's easier to control, to manage my weight without it. And I only feel that it's particularly useful to me if I'm trying to bulk um, for bodybuilding purposes and stuff, because I power lift and I bodybuild as well. Um, so that's usually how I'll use that. But generally, I just eat. My main staple is still always beef. I notice distinctly that if I'm having beef less than like 3 or 4 days a week, my energy levels are not the same. So I need to have beef as my main staple on a daily or at least semi-daily basis, and then I'll throw in whatever I'm feeling, chicken, sometimes some lamb. It's usually more dependent on what's on sale now that prices are going through the roof on everything, and I'm trying to save. Uh, but yeah, it's anywhere from fatty to lean cuts of beef, and then some chicken here and there, some pork.
Is that 1 meal a day, 2 meals a day?
Oh yeah, so I got away from the one meal a day. I eat kind of ad libitum now. It's much more kind of intuitive style. I'll fast once a week, um, and sometimes 2 or 3 days a week if I'm busy and I just don't have time to eat or something. But typically on average days, I'll probably have at least 2 meals, sometimes three. Um, yeah, yeah, usually
So
averaging two.
mm, so going into that strict line and then transitioning through to being the carnivore you are now, did you notice any improvements in your performance in the gym or the results you were getting?
Yeah, so a few things. So ever since keto, my gym performance had skyrocketed dramatically, and my muscularity, my fat mass went down significantly. Um, But after the first time doing carnivore, that was when I bumped up my strength levels specifically, for powerlifting in particular. I added the first time I really committed to carnivore back in 2018. I think the first time I competed in powerlifting was 2019, and in about a 4 month period, I added close to 50, like between 30 and 50 pounds to my bench, squat, and deadlift, which most people will tell you is impossible without steroids, uh, which was really cool. Um, and and then since then, I've just been slowly progressing more and more. And again, I'm 33 now. I'm going to be 34 this year, and I should have plateaued supposedly a long time ago. I shouldn't be able to build any more muscle mass according to this, but I have been. Been feeling better. That was the big thing, is that I had a lot of joint pains. I've had slip discs in my back. I've had herniated discs, severe foraminal stenosis, uh, chronic knee pain, ankle pain, hip pain, shoulder pain, neck pain, all of it, you name it. I don't have any of it anymore. Like I've done have had instances where I did stupid things in the gym, and I was messing around and I like hurt myself. But I've noticed, it's really, my recovery is insane. Like I'll do something that I know for a fact if I had done it 6 or 7 years ago, I would have been out for weeks, if not months. And now I'll do something like that, and I'll be sore or uncomfortable for a day or a couple of days, and then I'll be right back in the gym perfectly fine within a week.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So, has your fiance been, joining you on this? Has she been convinced to join you, or is she doing her own thing?
She's wonderful. I love her to death. She loves her fruit. Uh, so she's still, she's here with me. She still will have like fruit, and she'll have some veggies here and there. Um, but other than that, I mean, we both work so much, especially her. So I pretty much do all of the cooking, and so I just cook a bunch of meat, and so she eats a bunch of meat with me, and her health is fantastic. She just has a little too much stress, unfortunately. But um, but her other than that, like her health is great. She's seen improvements like in her lab work and stuff uh, since she and I have started dating 2 years ago now.
That's awesome. And how about, like, people around you when you're at work or just friends? How do they react to the way you're eating?
So that's been the widest array of different kind of reactions. Everyone's always curious about it, um, mostly because I I'm in shape. I look healthy, and I am pretty strong, and most people have trouble kind of gaslighting or denying that. And so when they see me and then I tell them how I eat, a lot of people will initially want to dismiss it, but then they they can't really argue with it, because I've been doing it long enough now that if it was going to do me harm, obviously it would have happened by now. Um, and so most of the time now, I'll just get people asking questions like, "Oh wow, I thought that was bad for you," or like how like what do you do? So how do you eat, and how do you afford this and that, and blah blah blah. So it's usually more inquisitive and less accusatory. Um, but my family, as much as I love them, they they're not so they're not they're wonderful wonderful human beings. But my mom's been a lacto ovo pescatarian for longer than I've been alive, 30 close to 40 years probably now. And my dad's never really minded much about his food. And they both have a lot of health issues that I wish they would listen to me about. um, but So that's pretty much the only place where I get a little bit of pushback. And then my friends hate going out with me, just because anytime we're out with anyone different, everybody always asks me about something, because they see that I'm just ordering a big steak and not eating anything else. And so they just sigh and, yeah, Nate's gonna have to talk about his thing again. I'm like, it's not like I'm bringing it
We got
up.
to talk about this again.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's not something I like go out of my way to bring up, but if people ask about it, I tell them about it. And I'm a personal trainer and a nutritionist as well. And so I talk to clients about this stuff all day, every day for years now too.
Yeah. I kind of feel a little bit like when you were talking about that people kind of expect you're going to be eating a little bit differently because you're in the gym, right? I kind of expect that for most people, it would just be a little bit of a different spin on the, well, I just eat chicken, broccoli, and rice
Yeah.
kind of, so maybe for someone like yourself who's, you're very muscular and it's obvious you're working out a lot, that people kind of would be a little bit more, yeah, not in your face about, oh, you need fiber, you need this, you need that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Mm.
and you'd be surprised too. I do still get that. I actually had one guy scream in my face uh, because he said that he followed my advice, which he was a client briefly, and he said that he and I had talked about diet a little bit, and he was extremely skeptical of all of it. He said that all sounds wrong. That goes against everything that I've ever read. What about science? What about this? What about that? And I said, that's okay. I mean, you don't have to follow any of it. It's just this is something I'm telling you. This is something that's worked for me. And he didn't tell me that he was doing anything or following anything. And then 4 months later, he didn't show up to the gym at all. He comes back and he yells at me because his uh, cholesterol went up, and it was my fault. And so I asked him, well, what were you eating? What have you been doing the last month or so? And he said, I followed your advice. And I was like, well, what advice? Because we didn't talk about anything specific, and I didn't make any recommendations to you. We just talked about some of the stuff that I do and some of the stuff that I've learned. And he said, I've been eating more fat. And I'm like, okay, well, are you still eating lots of sugar as well? He's like, well, I don't want to talk about that. And so it was, he just started screaming that, I destroyed his health. And that's actually the only time I've been a coach for 15 years now. It's the only client I've ever had who uh, had a negative experience or was angry with me about anything. And so that was a little bit jarring, especially since he refused to. Because I told him, listen, if this is something that I did to you, um, then I am responsible and I will take full responsibility for healing you and helping you. So I just need to know. I need to know what's happening. I need to know what you're doing. So what did your doctor tell you? And he said his doctor didn't even tell him anything. He just got blood results back and he saw that his cholesterol was higher and he knew because he Googled that that high cholesterol is bad for you. And so I tried to explain to him that my cholesterol is high and I am at lower risk for disease because of it. And I can show him the studies that prove that. Uh, but he didn't want to hear any of that. And that's just the reality with some people, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, in 2024, there's so many reasons to be getting in someone's face, and like getting your results back is kind of not one that would have been on my bingo card, but yeah.
Well, especially, I mean, it's one thing if he would have actually spoken to his doctor and his doctor was legitimately concerned, like, oh, what are you doing? Are you messing with this or that? But he didn't even speak to the doctor. He just got the results back and tried to interpret them himself, and has never looked into any of this and doesn't know anything about the diet stuff. So that kind of threw me through a loop a little bit, admittedly. But so what I'm trying to be more conscientious now of listening as closely as I can to be. I've always tried to listen as closely as I can to people, um, but what I've learned over many years of training hundreds and hundreds of people over the years is just that number one, you can't make anybody do anything. You can't make anybody want to improve their health. They're just going to, or they're not. And number two, uh, I have to become better at meeting people where they are, and some people are just in that state of they're still 100% convinced of everything that everything the government has ever said is 100% true, and anything that questions it is a crazy conspiracy theory. Um, and the media and news stations have never lied, and they exclusively tell the truth. And that's a lot of people nowadays, and it's hard to fault them for that. My family, like I said, my family is really similar in that, and they're brilliant people. They have great educations, and they're really um, discerning, really analytical. But they also grew up in an era and in a place where these things were more trustworthy. The media and governmental bodies were a lot more trustworthy, and there was good evidence to believe that they had our best interests at heart in a lot of ways. Um, and I don't think that's the case anymore, and I don't have the ability to show people that that's not the case. I'm not good enough at it.
Yeah. So, along these lines, you talked about how you're gonna study to be a nurse practitioner. Do you think there's going to be, times during your studies where you're gonna have to kind of bite your lip and just get through it?
Yeah, my fiance and I have already talked about the worries about this. I have a lot of trouble, especially now, holding my tongue on these sorts of things. But I will say this: so far, we'll see what happens as I get more into because I have some prerequisites to finish at community college, so that might take me a year or so, and then I'll be able to jump right into the graduate school work, since I already have my bachelor's. Um, and so I don't know how the graduate school work is going to look, since that is higher level. But I'm really impressed with the community college work right now. Like the professor that I have right now, she came right out and said, it's a biology course I'm taking, fundamentals of life science it's called. And she came right out on the very first day of class and said, I don't talk about anything political, I don't do any um, you know religion, philosophy, I don't do any of that stuff. We're just here for science, I'm here for biology, I'm going to explain to you how systems work, and you can talk about the other stuff elsewhere, but that's not what we discuss here. And a lot of times professors will claim that they do that, and they pretend that they do that, and then they'll just inject their political opinions as though they're scientific fact. um, and this professor has not done that at all. She has done a great job uh, of keeping things very just strictly scientific. It's interesting too, because the textbook that were assigned for the course, I can see the propaganda in the textbook, and she actually deliberately avoids that aspect, which I again really appreciate with her tutelage there. But yeah, that in the textbook, for example, there was a section where they were talking about evolution and how things evolve, and then it kind of got into climate change, and it kind of pushed it. Essentially, there was an entire chapter where they basically were pushing the reader, assuming that the reader is a student, into climate activism. And Yeah, and so they even were recommending at the end, like, oh, you can make a change if you know reach out to your congressman and support this or that. And now I'm right at the situation now where we're into the molecular science portion, and we're I was just reading the chapter today on uh, protein, fat, and carbohydrate, and the composition of those molecules, and how they look structurally. And I think it's really funny. I have a feeling that my professor is probably going to skirt this again, probably intentionally, which I appreciate. But in the textbook, it again said that there was one note about how carbohydrates are an energy source, but they don't provide much energy for very long. And I was impressed at first. And then it said, and that's why that people get really fatigued when they don't have enough carbohydrate. And and so and then they didn't provide any, like, everything in this book is cited and texted. They didn't provide any citations or any text or any evidence for that. They just stated that as though it was fact. And then they moved on to uh, talking about how low carbohydrate diets can be risky and cause weakness and energy levels, and low energy levels. I mean, which is super ironic because as someone who's been doing this for 13 years now, I've had nothing but better energy levels than every single one of my peers doing the same sort of thing. Um, and that was one of actually the biggest things that I noticed with carnivore. I forgot to mention is when I made that distinct switch, well, where I actually went lion diet, um, I started doing things that were beyond even my purview before that, and beyond stuff that I've seen people who literally are on steroids able to do. Not that I'm some amazing whatever. I'm not particularly strong for my size. I have some lifting records now, some state records. Nothing super impressive though. But for what I've been able to do throughout my entire 17-year lifting career, this was beyond anything. Like normally for powerlifters, if you do one max, like a bench press max or a deadlift max or a squat max, that's your lift for the day. And you need to take it easy. You probably need to take a day, maybe even 2 days off after that because it's so much loading on your central nervous system and your whole system. I got to a point where I was doing 11 different maxes every single week and then working out again the next day because I was recovering so easily and so well. Um, and I remember too, because I was trying to promote my business at the time and I posted on TikTok. There was one day where I think I did 16 separate brand new maxes that I'd never done. So weights that were the highest weight I could possibly do on 16 different exercises that were all compound exercises that should completely fatigue my central nervous system. Um, I did them all in one day, and somebody on TikTok was like, "Well, those aren't true maxes." I said, "Well, I mean, yeah, maybe if I did each one separately on a different day, I might have gotten a little bit higher, but they're weights I've never hit before, and I've never met anyone in my life who did more than even just three maxes in a single day without collapsing and needing an entire week off." um, so that was pretty incredible.
That's fantastic. Um, just back on the about the community college and
Oh
the
yeah,
kind
sorry.
of it's a little bit political and stuff as well. I feel like this is actually a good advertisement for why perhaps people should defer college or university until they've traveled or got some real life experience, worked a little bit or something like that, you know? Because when you then come back into it with that real world experience, you're more likely to take a more critical view to things when you're reading them, you know?
Hmm. Yeah, that
Mm.
that has made a huge difference for me because um, I was worried about that. That's one of the biggest things that I think messed me up for so long, all throughout school, high school, and my undergrad degree as well, because so much of that was peppered in, and I didn't realize it. And I don't even think the professors were trying to do. I don't think they had malicious intent or anything, um, but they they have a subconscious bias themselves and they pepper that in and I believed a lot of things that number one just simply weren't true, and number two I had developed like fundamental um core beliefs about that I didn't realize I had never even challenged until I spoke to people who disagreed with me and they challenged it and brought evidence with them. And I realized I didn't have a single piece of evidence to back up any one of my claims. And that's when I started questioning, like, where do where do my claims actually come from if I can't even defend against one simple critique? And that was what I had originally questioned things with the diet stuff, and then this was what really led me off on a whole other tangent of questioning, uh, my political beliefs and my spiritual beliefs and all kinds of things.
In the area you live in the States, how are things as far as diabetes, the obesity epidemic, that kind of thing? Is it worse than the average of the nation? Is it a bit better?
Uh I would say it's funny because Vegas is a big fitness hub. We like us, LA and certain parts of Florida are like the three like biggest parts in the entire country for the hubs of fitness where all the big gyms are, all the everything is. And so you'll get extremes here. You'll get people who are hyper fit, who are world champion powerlifters or bodybuilders or whatever kind of athlete. Um, but the vast majority of people, I would say it's very, very much average, average throughout the country. And if anything, um, possibly, unfortunately, even slightly worse off. I don't know if it's significantly worse off, but but it's at least as bad as I came from California originally. I moved here in 2017, and I would say it's at least as bad out here. The difference is, uh, which I appreciate, out here people seem to want to do something about it, at least, whereas in California there's much more the ideology being pushed of just where, like, some people really know that they're in trouble and that they need help, and those people will probably reach out. But a lot of people are just, body positivity. It's, I got to love myself exactly the way I am, and I'm perfect just as I am. And it's really sad because I see the consequence of that, and with how many hundreds of people I've trained over the years, I've now seen I've seen the start and I've seen the end of people's decisions. And I see when they're young in their 20s or 30s and starting to make decisions. And then I see, other clients who are in their 50s and 60s who are telling me that, they made those decisions, and now they have type 2 diabetes. They just had to have a heart transplant. They just went through all of this stuff. And that's my biggest thing is I'm trying to get that message to people now. And I know that's part of why I'm trying to become a nurse practitioner is I know that as a trainer and nutritionist, I have a little bit of clout, but again, nobody knows me from Adam. And for all they know, I'm just another one of those guys who posts on Instagram who's just been in shape his whole life. He's just a lucky, genetic lottery kind of guy. And I eat whatever I want. And I just, not everyone can do that. But in reality, I used to eat whatever I want and I felt like crap. I was lucky. So I didn't get morbidly obese because of it, but I felt like crap. I was miserable. I had horrible depression and anxiety. I, I I had so many struggles that I never needed to have, and that's why I want to push for this so much more because I see so many people with that, and I know now, and I look at them and I see them. You don't actually have to deal with that. Like, that's not just a normal thing that everybody deals with. I know everyone is dealing with it because everyone I know is too, but you don't actually have to deal with it.
Yeah, that's to me, that's the kind of the saddest thing about the body positivity movement is that it's not about what someone looks like, it's about they don't understand how good they could feel. And I
Mhm.
don't mean feeling good about your appearance or anything like that. I mean just feeling good, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I wish. I'm hoping that I can start to explain uh, molecularly and from a true scientific standpoint with my formal education in this stuff soon here. But that's something that has been the hardest thing for me to relate to people um, when I try to explain is just it's the Plato's cave scenario. Everybody's kind of in Plato's cave, and all we see is these shadows on the wall, and we assume that that's what life is and that's what the world is. And then there's the guy who actually made it out of the cave and says, no, there's sunlight, and there's those shadows are people, and there's other things out there. And no, everybody says he's the crazy conspiracy theorist, and what are you talking about? We've only ever known the shadows. And it's it's so hard to I mean, it actually goes back to kind of to my education in philosophy, is that it's just about near impossible to describe the phenomenological um, aspects of an experience without having the actual experience. It doesn't matter how articulate you are, how good you are at explaining things. People have to actually have the experience to understand. Oh, this is what feeling good feels like.
Yeah, exactly. So if you had a friend or a colleague come to you and say, "Look, okay, I want to give this a try," what advice would you give them to get started with carnivore?
So, and I've had this happen many times, and I've had clients do it as well. Um, it's it varies a lot depending on the person. Um, I've had some people who are just the like 0 to 100 type people. I had one client once who just took to it amazingly. I just told her like, okay, well, this is what you can do. It's a dramatic change from what you're currently doing. She's like, okay, I'll do it, and just suddenly just went straight, full carnivore, no problems, felt amazing, lost 80 pounds in like a couple of months, and just fantastic. And then actually she broke a couple world records in powerlifting shortly after that, which was really cool. Um, and she had never lifted weights before in her life, and then she suddenly had no idea how strong she was, and she just started breaking world records. Um, and so essentially what I tell people, for the majority of people, I think most of us are. We've heard the distinction between the abstainers and the moderators. Judy Cho talks a lot about it. I think most of us are truly abstainers. A lot of us like to think that we're moderators, but we're really not. We're really abstainers. And I think the path that I took to abstention, I think, is a useful path. I think it's uh, Bert Lustig who talks about this, maybe the bridge foods, where I do think it can be helpful to start kind of the way I did, with like a keto, like a slow keto progression. You can still have some of your like low carb processed foods. Obviously, this is stuff that you don't really want to be having, but it will help transition you away from the stuff that you've been used to your entire life. And then slowly, one by one, as you notice that those things aren't serving you very well, and you start to pay more attention to how your food makes you feel as opposed to how it tastes. Um, and you can still love how it tastes. I love every single meal that I have, but noticing that, within an hour, oh, okay, I'm kind of low energy now, or oh no, I feel fantastic. I could go for a run right now or do a workout. And noticing those sorts of things, that's what I would argue is your best indicator for how you should proceed, is what your reactions to your food are. So I always recommend to people keeping a food log, regardless of where you are. Start with a food and mood journal, where you just are logging like, okay, I ate these things at this time, and then at this time I started noticing some bloating or some gastrointestinal distress or acid reflux, or I felt great and I did a workout and it was the best workout I've ever had, or just making those sorts of notes so that you start to internalize what it is that your food is actually doing to you. And I think that's the best place to start. Some people can just jump right in and go crazy with it, like that one client that I had. I think that's a rare breed. Those are like the people who have been addicted to drugs their whole life, and then they just one day suddenly decide to get it together and quit. Um, but that's what this is. I mean, and I've talked to people who were addicted to drugs, and not just weed or something, but like heroin and cocaine and serious drugs, and every single one of them has said the same thing. It was 10 times harder for me to kick sugar than it was to get rid of heroin or cocaine or whatever the drug was.
That's so scary, isn't it, to think that sugar is so addictive.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, how can people reach out to you, Nate? Do you
uh,
have any social media or website or anything?
yeah, so I have a couple things going on right now. I tend to try to keep myself pretty pretty busy nowadays. I am working and trying to help build up a gym called Lean Dog Fitness. It's a gym out here in Vegas. Well, it's in Henderson, technically, just on the border of Vegas. Um, their website is leandogfitness.com, so you can find them on there. They also have a social media at Lean Dog Fitness. On I think they're just on Instagram and Facebook right now. So I'm trying to help build them up. They're having me run all the nutrition side of things, which has been really helpful. So I'm hoping to branch that out more, and then ideally, if that goes well, then once I become a nurse practitioner, I'd like to kind of roll it into a medical practice sort of thing. Have it be gym, medical practice all in one. That's kind of my eventual goal with this. Uh, I also have my own stuff because I also train people online. I do both lifting coaching and nutrition coaching. And you can find me at Fellowship of the Nate on Facebook and Instagram. I'm a big Lord of the Rings fan. That's where that came from. And then on Twitter, I'm at Fellowship Nate. Um, and then I am still working on building out my business side of things. I had a website at one point. I'm trying to get it back up. It's just my name, NateClipfeld.com. Currently, it's not running or anything, but I'm working on trying to build that back up. So I have a lot of irons in the fire there with school and all of this stuff going on too. But yeah, those are the best places to find me.
Sure. I'll put all those in the show notes.
Thank you.
Um, Thank you so much for coming on today, Nate, and sharing your story. I really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. I appreciate you having me, Dave. And I just hope that anybody who sees this is encouraged, number one, that it's not some weird fringe thing that is only gonna be necessary for people with the worst possible diseases or whatever. Anybody, like I was a normal person. Like I had some issues, but it was nothing. I didn't have anything autoimmune, anything very severe. My seizures had already gone away just with keto. Um, and I could have lived the rest of my life like that and been pretty okay. But I never would have known the amazing feeling that I have now if I had not done carnivore. And so that's where I encourage people to at least try it, at least 30 days. I argue 60 to 90 days of a true just meat, salt, water, whatever meats and eggs and whatever animal products that you want. Just give it a try, um, and if it doesn't work for you, come yell at me. But but otherwise, I I think it's worth a shot for every single person. And then they can reintroduce stuff too if they really want to. And some people do well with that, and then they're totally fine. They heal their gut. It's a wonderful experience. But I do encourage people to at least give it a shot.